Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we're going to be talking about Tropical Storm Grace and the potential strengthening it has ahead of it, and it could even become our second hurricane of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. Before we get started with today's video, be sure to like and subscribe. Make sure that subscribe button is turned gray and notifications are on. That way you do not miss a future video, and we're just going to get right into the video actually. So here is Grace as of the 2 p.m. update. Really no changes from as opposed to 11 a.m. Winds of 50 miles an hour sustained, pressures 1,005 millibars, and it's moving west at 15 miles an hour. So it's moving towards Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico. So it's going to be trekking towards the west through the northern Caribbean over the next 24 hours. All right. So here we have the track from 11 o'clock this morning. All right. And if we can probably get the updated, so 2 o'clock the track doesn't change, except the current position of the storm might change it too. But at 5 o'clock, then we'll get another track update. But here, again, at 50 miles an hour, winds gusting to 65 miles an hour right now. And you can see where those tropical storm force winds are. So pretty much affecting Jamaica around the Kingston area. So Jamaica is now feeling those tropical storm force winds, as you can see by the teal coloring. Now, according to the National Hurricane Center, all right, it could be a tropical storm, or a stronger tropical storm, I should say, by 8 p.m. tonight. It could be 65 mile an hour storm, winds gusting to 75. And for a place like Georgetown, right, the two islands here just between Cuba and Jamaica, I'm surprised they didn't put a hurricane watch out at least, because the National Hurricane Center is forecasting a hurricane right next to Georgetown by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Winds of 75, gusting to 90, and sustained winds of 80 miles an hour, winds gusting to 100 by 8 p.m. All right, so we're just going over the National Hurricane Center track right now. Although, if they're forecasting 75 mile an hour storm here, it could even be stronger than 80 once it comes on shore. So if they're forecasting an 80 to 85 mile an hour landfall, then maybe back down to 75, then down to 70 again once it crosses the Yucatan. It's not a huge, massive land, and it won't be moving that slow, so it won't really have time to get messed up all that much. But it could develop into a hurricane over the Gulf of or the Bay of Campeche, the southwestern Gulf, and then move over mainland Mexico, where there's more population there right now. So we'll be watching it, and hurricane watches are out for Cancun in the Yucatan. Havana, but south of you, tropical storm watches are in effect. In the southeastern parts of Santiago de Cuba and the eastern part of Cuba is under tropical storm warning. And so if we look here at some key messages, again, heavy rainfall for Haiti, which just got slammed by that earthquake, which is like really a shame, 7.2 magnitude. So they don't need this, but thankfully it's departing from Haiti, and pretty much impacts are wrapping up there soon, if not already. Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and northern Yucatan. Tropical storm conditions are expected or ongoing right now for Jamaica today, and tropical storm conditions are expected over portions of the southern coast of Cuba. All right, increasing risk of wind, rain, and surge for the Yucatan Peninsula Wednesday night into Thursday, and they're probably going to need a hurricane warning, but they put a watch out because nothing's set in stone yet. If we look at the tropical storm force wind probabilities, anywhere inside of like that brownish color and up, so brown, orange, red, purple, that's where we have our tropical storm probabilities over 50%. And of course, where the storm will be tracking through shortly, of course, the purple pretty much means near 100%. Now, as of right now, no one in the lower 48, maybe except the very southern part of Texas, is in that. So we'll be watching out, but don't exclude the threat if you're in Texas, especially southeast coast of Texas, right? This could still go a little bit further north. If it makes landfall here, at this spot right here, surge will be still prominent for Texas. So definitely want to keep watch if you live in Texas or anywhere along the Gulf Coast still. But the Pacific side of Mexico could even see some tropical storm force winds. We'll see as this continues to move towards the west. All right, so we're going to be going over some maps now and the concerns I have about why Grace could get really strong. All right, and first off, we're just going to start off with the wind steering. This is the upper level wind steering, right? We have this upper level high pressure that's upper level high pressure that is in place. And what it's doing is it's steering Fred this way, because we know that it's clockwise flow around the high pressure. So Fred's going to get steered that way. Then Henry is going to get steered this way because, again, clockwise flow. And that same high pressure will also be steering Grace this way because that's how the flow is around the high pressure. And you can see by the arrows here, all right, it's probably going to be tracking in this direction, pretty much towards the Yucatan. All right, and now just because the arrows go north like that, that doesn't mean that's where Grace is going to go. It could, but of course we see a lot more arrows pointing towards the left, and the atmospheric steering, the high pressure will pretty much stay there. It's not going to weaken, allowing for Grace to turn north. So we'll probably keep on a westward journey. If that high were to weaken, though, then Grace could potentially turn its way to the north. All right, but it probably will stay intact, at least for a little while. And it'll probably be tracking across the Yucatan, then towards the Bay of Campeche. But here is the wind shear. And you can see wind shear around the system right now, very low, and actually dropped a few knots over the past 24 hours. We could see it go up a very little bit. Let me move this out of the way. It may go up a very little bit, but I'm talking like maybe going up by about 5 or 10 knots as it tracks west. And it could actually be decreasing again. But then once it gets to the Bay of Campeche, wind shear is pretty much gone yet again. So really no shear once it hits that area of the Gulf of Mexico. Dry air, that's another concerning thing, right? Here's Grace, all right? Really no dry air. There's a very little bit over the Yucatan, but it actually will probably go south of that, so it might not even be affected by much of that dry air, and it could even fizzle out by then. We'll have to watch another tropical wave over there on the right side of your screen closer to Africa. But here is the really concerning thing. All right, this is the ocean heat content. All right, and as you can see, remember how Fred strengthened over the Gulf of Mexico? There wasn't much heat content in this general area except in the central Gulf, which none of that, if you look at that red area, that really never enhanced Fred that much. But look at all the red we have in the northern Caribbean. Yeah, so not only is there going to be, I'll show you the sea surface temperatures as well. Not only are the sea surface temperatures pretty much just as warm as they were for Fred. Fred went through about 86-degree waters or so. This will go, Grace will go through the same. But not only do we have the warm sea surface temperatures, but we're also going to have very high ocean heat content. As you can see by the darker reds, pretty much maxed out heat content. All right, and that's something that Fred did not have. So, and Fred was putting up with shear a little bit and still managed to get up to 60 miles an hour or 65 for landfall. So that's a little concerning factor for right now. Sea surface temperature anomalies are above average in the northern Caribbean, but the Bay of Campeche, they're even farther above average. But in terms of the actual sea surface temperatures, pretty much sitting around 86 where it is right now. And as it continues to move through the northern Caribbean, it feels closer to Cuba, around 87, 88. But most of the northern Caribbean area right here, pretty much around 86. Right? And for the Bay of Campeche, again, also 86. Maybe in this area right here, maybe around 87. So very, very warm water. This is like borderline bath water. All right, and this is what Grace is dreaming of right now. It's gonna, once it moves away from, so it's pretty much right here. Once it moves away from Jamaica and into the northern, like the more deeper waters of the northern Caribbean, expect some strengthening. I wouldn't even leave out, I'm gonna even say it's possible for rapid strengthening. Now it's gonna have two chances to strengthen and or rapidly strengthen. It's gonna have one shot in the Caribbean, then it might cross the Yucatan, either weaken a little bit or not strengthen, and then it's gonna have another shot. It's gonna have its redemption shot once it hits the Bay of Campeche, right, in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. So it's gonna have two chances to really get its strength going. So winds are right now 50 miles an hour. Again, pressure is 1,005 millibars. And here's a still satellite image in front of you. Of course, we're gonna get a loop of that satellite pulled up in a little bit as well. So let's go over some of the track guidance. All right, we got the 18Z model guidance coming in. Really not much changing. They seem to agree on the track of where it's going to go. Near the Yucatan, right about here, cross over the Yucatan and into the Bay of Campeche, and then pretty much going through mainland Mexico, and then maybe even crossing into the Pacific, and we'll see what happens after that. Now, if it goes south enough, it might stay over land for longer and might not have as much time over the Bay of Campeche, so it might not be as strong. But if it goes north, a little bit further north, like what the majority of the models are saying, they'll have a bit more time over water, a little bit less time over land, and then more time over the Bay of Campeche. So that's why track can make all the difference for in terms of strength. So let's look at some of the GEFS model tracks. So you can see, look at the strength as we head crossing the Yucatan, and then even after that. Pressure below 1,000 millibars. Some models even do bring it below 980 millibars of pressure. So a very strong system indeed. So as for the GEPS model tracks, now these sets do bring it a little bit more northernly, and this isn't really, this is from 0Z, so of course I keep refreshing it because I I don't think there's another update yet for the GEPS model tracks, but these sets for right now do bring it north. And of course, that would be, a more Texas-centered event. If it makes landfall in the northeastern corner of Mexico, then yes, Texas could be in the brunt of it, or at least get a lot of impacts from it. So Texas, definitely don't want to rule yourself out of this equation by any means. And new model or strength guidance is coming in. Really not much changing from earlier from the 12Z. So a majority of the models do have it as a Category 1 hurricane by 24 hours out, and a few do keep it a tropical storm. But either way, 24, 48 hours out, expect strengthening. All right, so this peak that you see right here, this is when it's tracking through the northern Caribbean, right? And then you notice a dip. This is when it crosses over the Yucatan, and then this next spike is when it goes over the Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. And in both peaks, some models do have a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 hurricane, right? And then this is when it goes over mainland Mexico, this next dip right here. And then maybe if it goes over the Pacific, a few models do have a rebound, but we're not there yet. We're focusing on where it could be before and after a Yucatan Peninsula landfall. Now let's go over some models. Before we look at the models, though, let's take a look at the satellite imagery, and you can see Grace is really like a highly convective system. Like, no matter how strong it is in terms of wind speed, like, just look at the convection here. All right, very cold cloud tops extending from Jamaica, and then even some still getting over to Haiti. All right, so, I mean, a lot. Like, this is a massive spread of convection here. And remember, the low center is somewhere in here. As of latest update, if we go back here, you can see Grace is pretty much centered right over Jamaica. So right on it or just north of it. So probably sitting somewhere in here. So, I mean, it's not that organized, but you can definitely see the swirl. You can see the convection and how it's built around it. So that's definitely interesting. So we're going to take a look at the H-Wharf. We got the H-Mod, the GFS, and the European models here to show today. And you can see the H-Wharf, which is a pretty good intensity model, pretty much has a hurricane as it's passing through the Cayman. I believe that's the Cayman Islands here. Now, which is pretty accurate because, or it's actually, well, at least it's on par because National Hurricane Center had it become a hurricane right about here. So pretty accurate, at least, accurate from what the National Hurricane Center was saying. And then continue to track towards the west. Now, the only difference is they have it becoming a 95 knot hurricane, which is just shy of a Category 3. So they have a Category 2 hurricane upon landfall, pressure down to 970 millibars, 969, crosses over the Yucatan, drops in strength, but look, they still try and strengthen the low even after it drops, so they could strengthen it over the Yucatan, which I don't think that's necessarily accurate because tropical system weakens over land. But then it gets back over the water, over the Bay of Campeche, and becomes a hurricane again. And then reaching winds of, 115 knots. That's a Category 4, like a big Category 4, pressure down to 950. So H-Wharf has really gone bullish on this storm. I mean, I've looked at a lot of runs of this system. Now, one thing about Mexico, it's mountainous terrain. So if we look at this, still a 70 knots hurricane, which is still like a Category 1 by Saturday morning. But this is a few hours later, actually like 3 hours later, and it's barely a tropical storm anymore because of the mountainous terrain. Now, that's good because it shreds the storm apart and weakens it in terms of wind strength, but that really doesn't matter because if you live on a mountain, an elevation, the winds are stronger anyway. But also, the rain is also going to be more torrential over the mountainous terrain. Then we'll see what's left of it. They have it becoming a tropical storm again over the Pacific, but we'll see. Only focusing here, while it's over the Northern Caribbean and in the Bay of Campeche, we're going to focus in on that. So let's go to our next model, all right? The H-Mod. That's another intensity model similar to the H-Wharf. I mean, I'm not saying their data is similar, but they're both like intensity models as well. So have becoming a hurricane. Here's one of the Cayman Islands. Here's Cuba up here. So this is by Wednesday afternoon. It becomes a hurricane, all right? And continues to track towards the west, 91 knots upon landfall. I mean, and I don't blame the models for saying this because, like I said, the Northern Caribbean has a bunch of heat content. Not only at the ocean surface, but below the ocean surface. Tons of heat content that can be filled into the system. And National Hurricane Center tries not to go too bullish. They like to undermine the track a little bit, so they probably will strengthen over time. So pressure of 978 upon landfall, around the Yucatan. Now, H-mod is more accurate than the H-Wharf in the sense that, yes, it's going to weaken over the Yucatan, not strengthen. Then it gets back over the water, probably strengthening, and then by early Friday morning, have it becoming a hurricane once again, Category 1. Then tracking towards the west, making landfall as a Category 2 hurricane. And on the eastern shore of Mexico here, on the side of the Bay of Campeche. So this definitely gives us something to watch, because this could be a pretty major storm, right? This could be like the strongest storm we had, all season. I think Elsa got as strong as 80. I want to say 85-ish, around there, I think was how strong Elsa got. So we haven't seen a Category 2 hurricane this season. So we'll see if Grace can be the one to do that. And based on the environment, I think it's possible. A good probability. Now, GFS, as it becoming, if you look here, it's hard to see, but there's a little dot of purple. But if you don't believe me, if you look in the top right, 64.4 knots, and 64 knots is a Category 1 hurricane. So the model kind of finds the area of strongest wind for you, so you don't have to look for yourself. But 64 knots, that's a Category 1 hurricane as it makes landfall on the Yucatan. They have it weakening considerably to barely a tropical storm once it gets over the Yucatan. All right. But the pressure still remains at 1,001, so that means when it gets back over the water, it will have time to re-energize again, and they have it becoming a barely, again, a 64-knot Category 1. Pretty far south, though, right? This is the southernmost point of the Gulf of Mexico here, all right? Like, Texas is like way up here. Sorry about that. Texas is like way up here, like past like the top of the screen. So, but 980 millibars is a pretty strong system. All right, finally, let's look at the European model. I can show you the winds at 5,000 feet, but do remember that those were winds at 5,000 feet and not the surface. But if we look at it from a vorticity scale real quick first, you can see a landfall there on Thursday morning on the Yucatan. A pretty, formidable, strong system over the Bay of Campeche. A lot of dark reds, a lot of convection, a lot of high vortices. So, and then tracking towards the north, and we'll see. Maybe if Grace does track far enough west, maybe it'll get far west enough to produce some drought relief for the west, because they still do need some. All right, let's face it, they do need some. Now we can look at the 5,000 feet winds. Continuing to track towards the west, probably around barely a hurricane force. But again, now sometimes the winds at 5,000 feet can be similar to the surface, but they're not always. So I'll keep that in mind. But pressure down to 993 millibars. And then even after landfall, still maintaining some pretty low pressure. So we'll be watching it. Pretty much all the models we looked at today have it at least a Category 1 hurricane. So, and judging by the model tracks as well. So this is definitely something to keep our eyes on for sure. So stay tuned for updates. I am the Weather Dude, signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.